All right, let's just get right into it. Today's explainer is about one of the absolute wildest corporate illusions in modern European history. We're going to unpack exactly how a single company, Wirecard, managed to fool auditors, financial regulators, and thousands of investors for 2 solid decades. Now, this isn't just a story about a stock market crash. We're taking a clinical look at a massive institutional fiction. It is honestly a masterclass in how a really compelling narrative can completely override hard facts, right up into the very last second. Picture 1.9 billion euros, just sitting there, right? Well, on June 18th, 2020, Wirecard asked its auditor to officially sign off on this massive pile of cash, supposedly tucked away safely in trust accounts over in Asia. But the auditor, they flat out refused. And it wasn't because the math was a tiny bit off, it was because the money literally wasn't there. It was a complete ghost, a total illusion. That exact date, June 18, 2020, was the catalyst. It was the moment the music stopped and this incredibly intricate house of cards began to collapse. Within literally a matter of days, a company that was widely considered the absolute titan of the German stock market would completely unravel. But, to understand how a failure of this magnitude happens so incredibly fast, we kind of have to rewind and look at how the illusion was built in the first place. So let's jump back in time. Part 1, the fintech miracle and the rise of Wirecard. The sheer scale of this company's climb is honestly staggering. Back in 1999, Wirecard started out as this modest, pretty unremarkable payment processor on the outskirts of Munich. In those early days, they were mostly processing payments for online gambling and pornography, the kind of stuff traditional banks didn't want to touch. But then, in 2002, a man named Marcus Brown took over as CEO, and he had a totally different vision. He pitched this idea that Wirecard wasn't just a payment processor. No, they were going to be the very face of Europe's digital financial future. They hit the Frankfurt Stock Exchange in 2005, and by 2018, this incredible ascent actually culminated in Wirecard replacing a traditional brick-and-mortar bank in the DAX, which is Germany's elite index of its 30 most valuable companies.
The power of this narrative was absolute. On one side, you had the agile, exciting digital fintech miracle. On the other side, you had historic, traditional institutions like Deutsche Bank. And at its peak, investors bought into this story so completely that this payment processor was valued higher on paper than Deutsche Bank itself. It's like people wanted to believe in this shiny digital future so badly that they just stopped asking basic questions about the present.
But underneath that confident public narrative, there was a completely hidden engine. Part 2, the invisible partners. This is where the crucial illusion really lives. We're talking about operations in Dubai, Singapore, and Manila. Get this. Over half of Wirecard's reported profits didn't even come from their own core operations. Supposedly, it came from 3 highly obscure partner companies in these locations. These partners were supposedly processing massive transaction volumes on Wirecard's behalf. But here's the catch. Outside of a very small, completely closed circle at the company, almost nobody could actually verify that these partners were doing what Wirecard claimed. The bulk of their profit was, effectively, totally invisible.
So how exactly do you protect an invisible business model for that long? Well, you build a massive shield. Part 3, defending the narrative.
The truth is, the press was actually onto this surprisingly early. Starting in 2015 and building up all the way through 2019, journalists at the Financial Times started publishing these intense investigations. And they were asking exactly the right questions. Where is the scale? Where is the actual hard evidence that these ghost partners even exist? But Wirecard didn't exactly open their books to clear the air. Instead, they launched an incredibly aggressive defense. They issued fierce denials, they slapped the journalists with lawsuits, and they constantly claimed they were just the victims of a coordinated attack by short sellers, investors who were actively betting against their stock. This put Germany's financial regulator, BaFin, in a really tough spot. They were faced with a stark choice: investigate the multi-billion-dollar company being accused of massive fraud, or investigate the critics and the short sellers. Astonishingly, the regulator chose to go after the critics. They even went as far as temporarily banning anyone from betting against Wirecard's stock. The reputation Wirecard had built was just so deeply entrenched that the very institution designed to protect the market actually ended up shielding the illusion. But listen, you can really only sue and deflect for so long before the pressure boils over. Part 4, the audits that revealed nothing. By late 2019, the noise was just way too loud to ignore. The discrepancy between Wirecard's massive public claims and reality was really starting to show. So Wirecard hired KPMG to do a special independent audit, supposedly to finally clear their name. But the findings? KPMG essentially said they couldn't verify significant chunks of the profit. Why? Because the necessary documents from those third-party partners were simply missing. Now, they weren't explicitly calling it fraud just yet, but they were basically pointing to a foggy blank ledger right where hard numbers were supposed to be. And that brings us right back to the final fatal hurdle. Wirecard's own longtime auditor, EY, had to sign off on the standard 2019 annual report. But before they would even consider putting their name on it, they had one massive, incredibly basic question. Where exactly is the 1.9 billion euros? The answer to that question is what we call the empty vault. EY refused to sign. Wirecard desperately tried to blame the Asian banks, but then the Philippine Central Bank stepped in and publicly confirmed the truth. The money had never even entered their financial system. All those documents proving the trust accounts existed, entirely forged. The vault was completely 100% empty. Once that vault was opened and shown to be empty, the end came faster than anyone thought possible. Part 5, the collapse and the fugitive. The speed of this collapse is just completely unprecedented. On June 17th, Wirecard is sitting right at its peak valuation, holding the line like nothing is wrong. Then, by June 19th, just days after the missing money is revealed, billions, literally billions in shareholder value just evaporate into thin air. And by June 25th, it hits absolute rock bottom with insolvency. We're talking about decades of a carefully, meticulously cultivated corporate image completely wiped out in a single week. The fallout was immediate. CEO Marcus Braun resigned and was quickly arrested. Now, it is extremely important to note here, as an objective explainer, that Marcus Braun legally denies all wrongdoing. He maintains to this day that he was deceived by other people within the company, and his trial in Munich is actually still ongoing. Meanwhile, his chief operating officer, Jan Marszalek, was fired and, well, he just vanished. Poof, he became a high-profile Interpol fugitive, reportedly fleeing to Belarus and then Russia, leaving behind a massive, completely unresolved international mystery. And so, on June 25th, 2020, Wirecard officially becomes the first DAX company in history to file for insolvency. I think the major lesson to take away here is that this wasn't just some simple theft pulled off by one guy in a back room. This was a 20-year institutional fiction. Think about it. Auditors, financial regulators, financial journalists, and literally thousands of investors all interacted with this company. Yet the illusion survived. Why? Because a confident, exciting narrative of a fintech miracle was vastly preferred over the foggy, boring, hard truth of actually verifying where the money was. If you found this explainer fascinating and you're looking for more stories exactly like this, where we explore the fortunes, the frauds, and the crucial historical lessons hidden in European money, then you are in exactly the right place. Go ahead and subscribe to Old World Money right now so you never miss out. Also, a quick reminder, this explainer is strictly for educational and historical purposes. It's definitely not financial advice. And as I mentioned, legal proceedings for some individuals involved are still strictly ongoing. Thank you so much for learning with me today. It really leaves us with one chilling question, doesn't it? If a deception this absolutely massive could survive for 20 years right in the heart of Europe's financial system, what other multi-billion-dollar illusions are currently hiding behind a good story? I'll see you in the next one.